The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Happy Monday, everybody. All right, let's kick the week off nice with a podcast episode. Anyway, hope everybody had a great weekend. So did anybody watch the Tom Brady roast last night on Netflix? It was actually the first live event on Netflix, so that was kind of interesting that they did that. But if you did not watch it, I watched it. It was pretty good, actually. It was pretty funny and man, painful at parts. These roasts are just brutal. They're brutal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, so Netflix did a roast of Tom Brady, and Kevin Hart was the host. So I'll start with him. You know, I actually don't really find Kevin Hart that funny. And when Cat Williams came out on the Shannon Sharp Club Shay Shay podcast, which I think I talked about before, and kind of said Kevin Hart was an industry plant and, you know, blah, 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 all that stuff, I was like, I totally can believe that because I really have never found him funny. But I have to give it up to him. He was pretty hilarious last night in this roast atmosphere. He was actually really good. What are some highlights? There's a gal named Nikki Glaser. I didn't even really know who she was, to be honest. But man, she crushed it. She crushed it. She was actually super funny. Who else? Bill Belichick, the former Patriots coach, and obviously Brady's longtime coach, that, you know, it seemed like they kind of didn't necessarily get along, but he was there. He came and he was actually very funny. It's pretty cool to see that, actually. What else? What were some other highlights? The Gronk obviously was there, Rob Gronkowski, and he was pretty funny, actually. He was pretty funny and very raw. I will say this, man, a lot of like DICK jokes, and I mean, I know it's on Netflix, but still in this crazy world we live in these days where the slightest thing comes off offensive, man, just tons of like gay references and gay jokes about like Tom Brady and Julian Edelman overall, and then just very graphic very graphic comedy. I mean, like cringe graphic comedy, which again, you know, it is a roast and that's the environment. And I honestly give it up to these guys for going there because again, times are different, man. Times are different. So I'll be curious. It seems like everything gets, what's the word I'm looking for? Everything gets scrutinized these days. So I'll be curious if it gets scrutinized at all, but yeah, it was pretty funny overall. It's on Netflix, definitely worth a watch, but I am going to forewarn you right now, it is probably not something you want to watch with your kids because it's pretty X-rated stuff. All right. Anyway, that's enough on that. I wanted to kind of continue the discussion we had on Friday and then set the tone a little bit for this week. And what I am going to try to do this week is get back to a little bit of basics, a little bit of deep, shallow dive basics. And that is try and, whether it's going to be the South Africa situation or some other stuff from the past, I do want to start to talk about some historical stuff as it relates to kind of what's going on right now. And a lot of this, honestly, is trying to do two things. One is trying to, first of all, I think it's cool to learn about the past and, try to look at the things that have happened through maybe a slightly different lens. And even if not a different lens, at least revisit some, critical things that took place in really the history of the world, definitely of the United States. And just kind of look at them now through, well, I guess the different lens being, and again, I'm not even sure everybody feels the way I do about things, but, one of the things that I talked about in the book, and I think really is true, is let's forget let's forget everything Trump related, everything Biden related, and let's just agree, if we can agree on one thing, and that is life from 2016 to 2020, and then 2020 to literally, let's say 2024. I mean, basically 2020 to today. If we can just agree collectively that the last 8 years, things have been different, then that's a great starting point. We don't need to get into a big, get into a big, picking sides between even Trump or Biden, Republican or Democrat. I don't really care, actually. All I want is the top line agreement that you are in agreement with the fact that, okay, you know what? Yes, things were different from 2016 to 2020. And then more importantly, actually, I'd really like to get consensus and agreement that, okay, you know what? Life has been different since 2020. And really it's since COVID and all of that. So if you are in agreement with that, then I think all the things we talk about moving forward will definitely make more sense, actually. And they'll make more sense because, again, at the end of the day, I really do think things have changed. I really do. I think things have changed. And part of what is, for example, part of what is going on right now in the Israel-Palestine stuff is the heightened awareness of it is what has been caused by social media. And even though I think there are, there's definitely downsides to social media, and there's definitely things that I think it has, almost harmed society with, there are definitely amazing upsides to it. Absolutely there are. And I think one of the biggest upsides is the ability to really, this is going to be funny, but it's true, to call a spade with what's going on in the world because of citizen journalism and because of the ability for somebody to just, turn on their video or take a picture on their phone or turn on their video and, really record what's going on. And I think that probably the best example of that was, what took place with, the killing of George Floyd that day 4 years ago, which, by the way, I think that ended up being May 26th of 2020. Hold on, let me check. Actually, May 25th, 2020. And then now it's the stuff going on in Gaza. I mean, that stuff is playing out in front of everybody's eyes. And there's some things we're going to talk about in relation to that. But the big change with everything is that ability to see everything real time. And that's significant. And honestly, I mean, that is a positive because of that, you don't have to only get one narrative, or only get one fact set. Now, again, it's up to you what you decide the truth is in regards to anything for that matter. But when you're getting really diverse opinions outside of the media who gets paid to give that opinion, I think that causes honesty. I really do. I think that causes honesty, and that keeps people honest, and that keeps politicians honest, and that keeps world leaders more honest. And quite frankly, that keeps any potential narrative from anyone honest when normal people could rebuke and refute what they are saying through their own, citizen journalism and stuff that is real time and that, quite frankly, is real. That was actually a perfect segue into the first thing that I want to talk about today. So this was in the Associated Press. This is an Associated Press story over the weekend, and the headline was, "Thousands of Israelis take to the streets of Tel Aviv to demand ceasefire and Netanyahu resignation."
I'm devastated. This country is our homeland, and what is happening here is, for everybody who believes in democracy, is terrible. And we're fighting for it. That's our place, that's our home, and we have no place else to go. And we hope the world hears us and knows that the people of Israel are not the government of Israel. We don't agree with the policy, we don't agree with the way they behave, and we want to have a different future.
All right, this is a perfect example, and this is pretty crazy. But thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv, and again, they want two things: they want a permanent ceasefire. They want to be done with this war. Like, nobody wants war. Normal human beings should never want war. There's no reason for war. But the people that want war, they're reaping a benefit from it. So the people in Tel Aviv, they've had it. They've had it with Netanyahu and with how he's done things. And they want, first and foremost, they want the release of the hostages, which everybody should want that. Again, I've talked about this probably, even though I come down hard on Netanyahu. I don't even know if I come down hard on him, but I'm not a fan of the guy. I'm just not. I don't think he's a good guy. I don't think he's a good guy. But I absolutely empathize with the people of Israel, and I absolutely empathize especially with the families whom have hostages still being held. I mean, that's got to be miserable. And so right now, the thing that's going on is they're in the middle of this peace negotiation between Netanyahu and Hamas, and it's going nowhere. It's like stall ball. If you know that, you know what I'm talking about. Stall ball. It's just like they're just delaying whatever it is they want to do. They're putting offers on the table that they know either party won't accept. And like I said, I need to formulate this a little bit better, but I really just do think that the entire concept of Hamas is there's more than meets the eye with that, and it is the precursor to 26 billion being sent again. It's the precursor to 3.5 billion being sent every year for the past 50 years. It's the precursor to a money train that feeds a lot of people, and that a lot of people get access to without us really realizing it, under the name of fear and, quite frankly, under the name of, democracy and protection and all that stuff. I just think there's so much more. There's so much more to that. But it is interesting to see the absolute, size of these crowds in Tel Aviv. And it actually is, I talked about this many, many episodes ago, and it's just all been forgotten. I'm actually going to try and revisit it. But prior to October 7th happening, there was unbelievable civil unrest and turmoil in Israel because Netanyahu was trying to basically take power, either reduce the power of the Supreme Court or take more power and concentrate it in his faction of government instead of the Supreme Court. There was a huge 60 Minutes episode about it. There was tremendous unrest all in that country prior to October 7th. And then October 7th happened just like 9/11. Remember? Exactly like 9/11. Everybody hated George W. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happened and everybody rallies around, nationalism. So that absolutely took place. But it seems like, especially in Tel Aviv, which is definitely the more liberal part of Israel versus Jerusalem, which, again, as I've talked about, that kind of leans conservative, and it definitely leans more on the religious side. But the people are done with it. They've had enough, and they're calling for his resignation big time. Now, again, this is an Associated Press story, but do you really hear this in the news? Not really. You kind of have to look for this stuff.
The Israeli people are hostages to the right-wing government. The people of Gaza are hostages to the Hamas, and basically there has to be a way to overcome that and to stop the fighting and the killing. This for now and to get everybody home.
That was a little hard to hear, but that was another Israeli protester. And he basically said the people of Israel are hostages to the right-wing government. and then the people of Gaza are hostages to Hamas. That's actually very well said. And you've got these two factions that keep fighting each other or battling each other, the right-wing Netanyahu administration versus, let's say, Hamas. And basically, those are the two that are getting billions and billions of dollars. They're Netanyahu from the United States and England and Germany and France and all those countries. And then Hamas, from Qatar, from the UAE, from Iran, from all the Middle Eastern countries that seem to be backing that. So, oh, God, you really do have to follow the money with this stuff. And like I said, and like I talked about on Friday, think about if there is no war, you don't need to send all that money. So, all of that money doesn't need to go to those entities. And when I say goes to those entities, things are finding their way into different pockets. They just are no different than the funding that's gone to Ukraine, which is just a giant. Oh, I'm not even going to say it. But anyway, I hope you understand kind of, I guess, what my bigger point of that is. And that is, again, like I talked about on Friday, peace is not a good business. All right, I have to play you this because, oh my gosh, I find this so funny. It literally feels like a TikToker going on TikTok complaining about something.
You have to hear this to believe this.
Okay, really, that was the funniest part because I thought that was funny. He started off with that.
You have to hear this to believe this. The International Criminal Court in The Hague is contemplating issuing arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials as war criminals. This would be an outrage of historic proportions. International bodies like the ICC arose in the wake of the Holocaust committed against the Jewish people. They were set up to prevent such horrors, to prevent future genocides. Yet now, the International Court is trying to put Israel in the dock. It's trying to put us in the dock as we defend ourselves against genocidal terrorists and regimes, Iran, of course.
So obviously, this is Netanyahu. Actually, I love the fact that he uses the word genocide. And again, that's okay. But then if the word genocide is used for what he's doing, it's not okay.
That openly works to destroy the one and only Jewish state. Branding Israel's leaders and soldiers as war criminals will pour jet fuel on the fires of anti-Semitism, those fires that are already raging on the campuses of America and across capitals around the world. It will also be the first time that a democratic country fighting for its life according to the rules of war is itself accused of war crimes. The Israeli army, the IDF, is one of the most moral militaries in the world.
All right, so that was his response to, if you don't know what's going on. So the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, and then remember the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. The ICJ was the one that they basically try cases where it's country versus country. So the ICJ was where South Africa brought the case of genocide against Israel. And then the ICC goes after individuals. So now it is being said that the ICC, I mean, obviously I think they are deliberating bringing up Netanyahu and his right-wing group of cronies up for war crimes. And I mean, obviously that's a big deal because that's like on an individual level. And so, when I hear something like his speech right there, you basically are, in some ways you're crying wolf. It's like all of this was created to literally never allow what unfortunately happened to the Jewish people during, Nazi Hitler reign, which obviously was horrible. And so they put all these programs in place to never allow that to happen again. And now those programs are basically saying, hey, wait a minute, you're doing this, and you're literally doing exactly what we have been created because of what happened to your people in order to stop. So it's a pretty interesting overall dynamic. And then I find it more interesting, just, the way he kind of tries to spin out of it. But again, I wanted to play that clip today, along with, really all the things that are going on inside Israel, which, the stuff that is obviously negative against the Netanyahu administration, that you kind of have to dig for that stuff. So anyway, I think there's some things coming out. I did want to revisit just my thought process of stuff. I am seeing a lot of, again, the George Floyd, if you remember, that kicked things off in 2020. I'm starting to think too many people are kind of already saying this. Like, they're already connecting these dots. And like I've said before, if the dots are that easy to connect, they're probably not the real dots. So, maybe nothing is going to happen in May. Nothing might happen in June. Nothing might happen in July. It might end up being closer to really crunch time. And maybe that's when all craziness breaks loose. Obviously you've got the Trump trial going on. So I do think that there needs to be closure on, whether he's found guilty and what that means. So maybe that is part of the stall ball that's taking place. That means if there is a major event in 2024, a la, the major event of COVID in 2020, maybe they're just waiting to see kind of what happens with Trump's situation and all that. All right, I'm going to leave you with a clip a friend from Chicago sent me, and we got a good week. We're gonna delve into some really meaty stuff this week. I actually am very motivated. All right, call a spade a spade.
In 2008, Chicago, financially struggling, sold its control of 36,000 parking meters to a private pool of investors that stretched as far as Abu Dhabi. The deal was for 75 years at a hefty sum of $1.15 billion. Fast forward to today, Chicago's loss is staggering, with over $136 million in potential annual revenue going straight to the investors' pockets. The investors? They've made a cool $500 million in profit above their initial investment, with 60 more years left in their contract. As the city fights to introduce sustainable transit alternatives, it's trapped, having to buy back parking spots at a premium.
The ending was terrific.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, as well as via Kindle. Pick up your copy today of Deep Shallow Dive Into You, a guide to having a more authentic relationship with yourself. Turns out it is indeed true. Bro wrote a book.